Book 74 of 2020 was The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. So, hello again after a long hiatus. I felt like doing a book review, so here I am. And I've got a different setup. My hair is a lot longer. You'll have to forgive me for the glasses and the reflection off the glasses. I can't see a thing without them anymore, so I can't read like my notes on my computer as I'm talking through this review. What I used to do in the past in these reviews is that I'd have, oh here it is, I have a big whiteboard. I'll not show you what's on there. I was thinking I probably should have checked that before I picked it up. I had a big whiteboard and I used to write my review, kind of what I was going to say on there, only like based on my written review that I always paste in the video anyway. But can I be bothered? Not really. So I'm just going to read you out, like, I'm going to talk around my review that I wrote, which is what I used to do anyway. So I can't quite remember whether or not I came across this book because I'd seen it on a podcast or if I'd just watched the podcast afterwards. I can't quite remember. So I used to watch Impact Theory with Tom Bilyeu, and one of the guests was Robert Greene, and he was talking about these 48 Laws of Power. And I'd also been on Audible, getting very obsessed with all the books that were on there because I was new to Audible, and I was reading loads and loads of books, obviously because this is 74 of 2020, so chicken and egg, I'm not quite sure what came first. So I've got kind of like both perspectives, what I'm trying to kind of roundabout say with that, in terms of I've seen Greene talk about these and I've read his book, and he narrates his book as well. So essentially what this book is about is that there are particular laws, so 48 different strategies to obtain power, and Greene bases these on historical events, things that have happened where it demonstrates these kind of principles. Now, one concerning thing about this book that I thought as I was reading it was that it's very instrumental in its nature, and I was reminded of a study that I teach to my students, which is by a researcher called Hancock, and it's about psychopaths and about how, you know, the definition of a psychopath is being instrumental in using people for your own advantage. And this is what this is describing. You know, this book is about how to obtain power and to use people for your own benefit. So it didn't really sit well with me as I was listening to it, because I was a bit like, do people actually use these strategies? And I also found myself thinking, they might work and be successful in the short term, and you know, you get that power initially, but it made me wonder about how, you know, the longevity of that, like how long is that actually going to last for? Because what gives you actual real power is when you have kind of like buy-in from the people that you're leading, for example, and that kind of connection with them. And I did also think that if you live your life in an instrumental way and you're trying to get power and you're trying to be better than people and all of that kind of stuff, you're missing out on the humanity of life and that love and connection that you can have with other people that power dilutes. Like, you don't really feel connection with people if you're always, you know, vying for power, and the way that you behave to vie for power kind of shows you in quite a negative light within social circles. So it was a bit like that was my thought that I was kind of having as I was reading it. I felt a little bit like, it doesn't really sit well with me, this book. What I also thought was, it reminded me of, I did read, what was it called? Maybe it was just called The Pickup Artist. I can't even remember now what the title of it was, but there's a famous pickup artist book. I mean, I've done a review on it somewhere. I imagine you'll be able to find it if you're that interested. And this book is, you know, there was a whole culture about it, and it was a friend that I had at the time that was reading it and trialing these kind of techniques on women. And they're obviously very successful in the short term of attracting women because of, you know, the psychological kind of techniques that they use. But it's inevitably doomed to failure because you don't build connections, lifelong connections with people on superficial kind of things. It's like, yeah, you can attract someone, but then how are you going to keep them? Because these people that have to resort to pick-up artist techniques have failed to educate themselves in how to actually communicate with another person and kind of resort to these base tactics of how to pull somebody rather than actually how to develop a connection with somebody. And there's no judgment there. If that's what you want to do and that's your aim, well, then that's a fantastic technique, isn't it? Because you can then use people in that instrumental way to meet your sexual needs. Like, no judgment, you want to do that, that's fine. However, I think sometimes people are a little bit misguided and use those techniques to try and get a relationship and wonder why that doesn't work. So yeah, this book felt very much like that. It was like it was a superficial way to get power, but actually missing the point of what real power is. Or then maybe that's just an issue with the definition of power. Like, if your definition of power is this instrumental control over others, then I suppose, yeah, maybe then that is kind of what this book is answering. But I think my definition of power is when you use power for good, and you can kind of almost you can be a role model to people, and that's quite powerful. I think when you empower people, as a leader, and you empower others, that's power. How I see it in a more kind of positive way. So this book was just not my definition of it at all. And I did mention kind of like my written review, like perhaps I'm naive, and I think maybe I am a little bit, because my motivation as a person is to be a good person and to kind of connect with people. And obviously I'm flawed and I have my irrational thoughts that think bad of people and stuff, we've all got those. But my deep down core is that I'm a nice person, and I'm trying to be kind to people where I can, try to reduce other people's suffering where I can. I had another thought then about how I read a book on office politics, and at the time I was very naive, very green about working in an office environment and the politics that goes on there, and I fell foul of that very easily when I look back now, and I think, God, you were so naive. Office politics is a thing, it happens, doesn't it? So this idea of power, perhaps it is happening all the time, and I'm just not aware of it because I'm trying to focus on kind of higher values. Maybe I'm just not seeing what's actually there. But I do feel quite saddened that people have to resort to manipulation and deception in order to get what they want. Like, can you not just connect with someone and just ask them if it's okay? And people will do that because they respect you. I feel like as well that it's something, all these techniques and trialing these things and doing them and to get power, I can't be bothered. I just can't be bothered. It seems a lot of effort that would drive you insane, and I just think life's too short to be trying to be on top, because as soon as you get on top, it's inevitable that you're going to fall down at some point. That's going to happen. So that effort to remain there, if you actually do look at kind of historical leaders, the effort, or even I was just thinking then of Henry VIII and Thomas Cromwell, and the downfall of that, and the Anne Boleyn, and just all of that kind of stuff. But Tudor history is probably all the history that I'm really knowledgeable in, so that's why I was coming up with those references. But the effort of that, the stress of that, could you be arsed? I don't think personally that I could. So the structure of Robert Greene's book, to get back on topic, is that there's 48 strategies of power. So how do you get power? So Greene terms these a law. However, when I say it's linked to historical kind of examples, it is very anecdotal. It's very kind of there's this historical event that happened, or there's this fable that happened, and therefore this law must be valid. But actually, it doesn't suggest validity. It doesn't suggest that these are actual ways of getting power. It might look like it on this. I feel like it's a very kind of superficial book, as I keep reiterating. I don't think it's really kind of delved into what power actually means in terms of human psychology. However, that's not what this book's for, is it? The people that are going to buy this book and think that this book is great are those that don't have the skills to exert power in their life as it is, which is why they're reading the book for the help. But this is not really delivering the reality of getting power. in the long term. Like short term, definitely, but then, yeah, I think it's a lot more complex than what this is suggesting. I did actually find some of the laws interesting, and it's funny because as I was rereading this review, because I wrote this review ages ago, read the book ages ago, I mean it was in 2020, it's 2023 now, and I did listen back to the book to be able to write the review at a later date, so, I haven't just kind of like made it up, I have like looked at it again. As I was reading it then, one of them, so in fact I'll read it first because then it'll make more sense to you, because I'm like getting ahead of myself with my thoughts. I've put in my review that I see some mistakes from my past life, and I do. So one of them is to never outshine your master, as it inspires insecurity in the master, but instead flatter them and make them look good. Now, because I am motivated to be the best that I can be, I'm not really interested in looking at what other people are doing. I just kind of make sure I'm good at what I'm doing. And if I'm not good at something, I work on it and I get better at it. I don't really have this kind of victim, feel sorry for myself attitude, and I don't really feel like woe is me and helplessness and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, right, I'm crap at that, I need to get better at that, what can I do, let's do it. And I kind of then achieve what I want to achieve. So when I've been in jobs and I've had someone who's a manager, there's been times where that manager has been lacking in certain areas, because we're all human, we're all learning, we're all developing. When you start a new job, it's very difficult, you've got to find your feet and get used to it, and I just did not have that compassion when I was younger, because I made the wrong assumption that people in positions of authority were there on merit and were there because they knew more than I did and they were better at the job than I was. Like, I had that false belief because that's kind of like how you're brought up to believe the world works, and it doesn't work like that. Sometimes people get promoted because of the potential that they've got, and they learn the job as they're going, and that is just the way it is. And of course sometimes that has to be the way it is, because you've got to start somewhere. Like when I think about jobs that I've done, when I first started them, and I've looked back and thought, actually I wasn't that good at that when I first started because I've never done it before. So that kind of like lack of compassion for me meant that I was quite critical of people that were in positions of authority of me, because I was a bit like, they should be better, they should be mentoring me and teaching me how to be better. And actually a good book that I read, which again there's another review on here, it's The Eden Project by James Hollis, which suggests that you're seeking fulfillment from work because you're trying to address childhood things that were not met. Like when you're younger, you want somebody to save you from adulthood. I was expecting my job and my manager to save me from the adulthood of me growing up and becoming the manager. So I've realised this about myself. And what this thing that Robert Greene says about not outshining them, the best way to get people to help you and be nice to you is to do the same, be helpful and be nice to them. And also, if you are a good person with the person that is managing you, they will say good things about you to other people. Like, it's common sense, isn't it? Like, and I think back to myself and I'm like, why did I not think that? Like, obviously if I'm difficult, and it's funny actually because I see difficult people in my workplace and I think, you're not going to get promoted because you are difficult. People are not going to promote you and give you what you want in terms of your career if you are a difficult person. And it's not suggesting that you should be a yes person, but you should consider making your manager's life easier, so that they feel that you're worthy of being said good things about and working with them in other capacities and what have you. You've got to think of the long game, really. And again, I'm not saying this to be like manipulative and instrumental, but it's just wisdom, isn't it? Why would you make your life more difficult? And the other thing is, like, this breeding of insecurity. When you get promoted to a management position, people change the way that they interact with you because of that position, depending on what it is. Obviously, if it's a bigger jump, then they behave in different ways, because ultimately you have the position to say things about them negatively to management, and commenting on their work and stuff like that. It becomes a little bit kind of like an us and them kind of dynamic where, and I'm not suggesting that this is everywhere in every workplace, because I don't feel like I have this in my current workplace with me personally in the role that I'm in, or with the kind of person above me, but definitely between senior leadership and the bottom. But in other workplaces where I've worked, there is a big disparity, and you know, people treat you differently, and that can be quite an isolating position to be in if you don't have any kind of friends on your level to kind of communicate with. Like, you know, thinking about somebody that I know who's in a position of authority, who's been in quite a lonely role because there's not been much connection with other people, and people have treated this person differently because of the role. And you have to maintain an air of professionality where, is that even a word? Professionalism, where you don't say negative things and you don't complain, even though there could be things that are upsetting you. It's like you've got to kind of deal with that in your own kind of way. So it can be quite a lonely place. So, you know, as somebody who's under a manager, like, it's natural for them to perhaps feel insecure if they're already feeling lonely and disconnected, and then you're being better at the job than what they are. Of course, that's going to put their back up a little bit and make your life more difficult. Also, to carry on with that law, Robert Greene suggested conceal your intentions and mask honestly, as it hurts more than it helps, as mentioned, and use actions, not arguments, to allow someone to see your perspective. So another, I mean, I think there must be other laws that I find interesting actually thinking about it. Conceal your intentions, mask your honesty, as this hurts. Oh, right, yeah. So to kind of break those down, so it's been a while since I've read it. Concealing your intentions. So sometimes when you tell people your intentions, they then cause problems for you. I've always been quite open and quite honest about what I want to do and what I'm doing and things like that. And actually it has meant that other people have kind of done similar things to what I aim to do but got there before me, when really if I hadn't have shared it then they wouldn't have known those things. So yeah, agree with that. And masking honest, I think I should say honesty rather than honestly. I think that's why I had an issue reading about it. I was very honest when I was younger, because when I was brought up by my family, I wasn't allowed to lie. It was really bad in our household to lie about anything. So we were very honest, to the point where we didn't even have boundaries, where we kept our private information to ourselves. Everything was shared, open, honest. I don't really know. I do know why that was. I can reflect and understand why that was and understand that psychology behind that. But personally, I think that that's not a good way to bring up your children, because then when they interact in the world and they take that honesty into the world, it's very difficult, because people don't like it when you're honest with them. They don't like being told things about them that they don't like, and they don't want somebody who's going to disagree with them and, you know, have an opinion and all the rest of it. It's like sometimes it's appropriate to mask what you think about things. For example, if you're at work and somebody introduces something that you really don't like and you really are not okay with, it's not good to actually show how annoyed about it you are, because you're going to look difficult. Like, hide it. Like, be positive. See the good in it. I mean, you don't have to lie. If someone asks your opinion, of course, share it in a diplomatic way, but don't demonstrate that you are, you know, really unhappy with it. Like, when I think back to my old workplaces, all the people that demonstrated this negativity and this kind of, and I'm not judging in the sense of them being negative, because if you're negative about something, you're negative about something, that you can't help that, that's how you feel. But you don't put that on everybody else, and no one's going to want to work with you. Like, you know, think about the way that you're behaving. It's not going to help you, and it's not going to get you power. So these laws kind of, you know, do work in that way. The last one as well there is about arguments. Use actions and not arguments. I remember when I was in a meeting with some of my colleagues, and we all taught the same subject, and all I wanted was to be the best teacher that I could be, to make the best lessons for my students and get them the best grades possible. That was my motivation. I had no want to be better than anybody else. I had no want to put anybody down. Like, that wasn't my intention at all. I just wanted what was best for the students. And I tried to argue for changes to the curriculum, and I was just hitting a brick wall, because there'd been an interpretation by the people that I was working with that I thought I knew everything, and I thought that I was better than them. And because that made them feel insecure about what I was saying, they had that negative reaction to me, which I had no awareness of because nobody spoke to me. It was all very passive aggressive. And it was only like a year later that one of them apologised to me that I realised I was not in the wrong there. Like, the way that they were behaving was very negative and, you know, not helpful. But I recognised that I didn't have an awareness of what was going on. I knew something was odd because they were being very mean to me, but I didn't really understand what was happening, and they obviously weren't mature enough to talk to me about it. But I wasn't going to win them over with arguments. Like, what does win people over is that if you do something and you show them that it works, they're more likely to kind of, you know, take that on board. So yeah, I agree with those laws. I think that they're very useful in terms of, you know, having an easier life, and if you really want power, getting that power. There were other laws, though, that were very worrying, such as, this one was really bad, get others to do work for you and take credit for it. Like, honestly, you're going to get found out. Like, that's only going to happen for so long before you make a mistake and people realise that that's what you do. And as soon as somebody finds out, that's it. Your whole reputation is damaged, and you're not going to be able to maintain that power long term. And actually, what makes you look better and what actually gives you more power is to empower other people. So there was a situation, I was in a meeting recently, and I got praised for having like a folder of like curriculum stuff. And I immediately gave credit to the person that started the folder, because that wasn't my work. Like, some of it was, definitely, but, you know, it had been started by somebody else. And so that wasn't for me to, and the only reason why I was doing it was because this other person had asked me to do it. Well, not advised me to do it. She hadn't asked me to do it, she advised me. So she really helped me out there. So I automatically would give her credit for that. And in that room, that shows everybody else that I'm not there to take credit for other people's work, because everyone would have known that that would have come from this person. So it's like almost like you'd be setting yourself up to fail in that situation. And that didn't even come through my mind. I was like, just give credit where it's due. And I think as well, I've been in situations where people have done this to me, and it's made me really resent that person, and at every opportunity badmouth them. And again, you shouldn't really do that. I've learned from that now. But in this situation, it was really detrimental for that person in the end, for them doing that. And, you know, they got found out and they didn't get the promotion that they wanted and things like that, because people realised that they didn't do any work and they took credit for other people. So once the other people left, i.e. me, there was nobody there to do the work for them anymore, and they looked silly and like they didn't do work. So you get found out eventually. So again, in the short term, it helps because people think that you're really great, you're doing all these great things, but your source is not going to be there forever. And perhaps some people don't wisen up to that, and you can claim credit off them for a long time. But people that are generally hard working and doing great things have an awareness that people do this to them because it's happened before. It's always happened to me multiple times. People take credit for what I do, and I don't say anything because it's like, then that makes you look bad because you're saying it. However, there are certain things that you can do which make it very clear that it's your work. So that's a better way around it, isn't it? Another one was, so another law was, avoid the unhappy and unfortunate as they will infect you, as they demonstrated a lack of respect for others. Oh, sorry, no, that's my... I'm just reading out my own thing here and not realising what I'm saying. So the second one there was avoid the unhappy and unfortunate as they will infect you. Now, I completely agree that this happens, that unhappy and unfortunate people do infect you with their misery. Like, they do. Like, this is what happens. And if you want to remain happy yourself, then yeah, avoid that. But how toxic is that? Like, that you can't be supportive to your friends or your family or even just a random person, that you can't offer support to them when they're clearly in need of that support. Like, if they are unhappy and unfortunate, surely you can ease that suffering by being nice to them, and not just saying, don't infect me. So, I mean, again, both of these things, taking credit for other people's work, avoiding unhappy and unfortunate people, it is showing that lack of respect for other people and not kind of treating them in a humane way. So again, linking back to this instrumental nature. And another issue that I had with a lot of kind of the examples that Robert Greene uses, these kind of historical anecdotes, is that they are heavily biased towards war, aristocratic courts and things like that. So the applicability of these laws are very kind of limited. Like, yeah, if you're in a situation where you're in battle with someone, yeah, these laws will probably be great. Or if you are in a court, you know, trying to get favour and, you know, cop off with a king and have a son, then yeah, maybe they work. But again, all of those things are so short term. Like, if you actually study the aristocratic courts, nobody stays in power for very long. Like, there's so many factions that kind of come in and out, and people get beheaded and done for treason, and it's just such a high turnover. These examples are not necessarily going to have that much validity to everyday real life. And yeah, okay, if you're in a company, in a dog-eat-dog kind of, you know, industry like finance or banking or, I don't know, something horrible, stock exchange, whatever, you're in like a company and you're against other companies, then yeah, that kind of attitude towards other people might be successful at getting you the power. I feel like it's very much if you're in a psychology where you're detached from people, like in war, in, you know, factions within aristocratic courts or companies that are, you know, competition with each other, then yes, maybe these laws would work. But in real life, they're not going to work. You're like too enmeshed with people. Like, can you really say that the people that you work with, that you're not friends with any of them? Like, is that how you want to work? Like, because personally, like, whenever I've been in a workplace where I've not been friends with people or there's been beef with people, it's never been a pleasant place to work or a pleasant environment. You know, the worst thing about working in a workplace is people that are passive aggressive because they don't have the maturity to come and speak to you about issues. And to be honest, again, it's like I mean, maybe that was a tiny little bit of judgment there. It's a bit of a sensitive topic at the minute. But, I mean, I can't really judge because I've been passive aggressive myself and tried to kind of excuse it by saying, oh, well, I was just doing this or that. But actually, I haven't got the maturity to go up to that person and say, actually, that's really bothering me. So, you know, there's something for me to work on myself, and probably why I dislike it so much in others, because I'm seeing that kind of reflected back at myself. So yeah, I feel like the kind of laws that are, you know, in this book, they're not reality, it's not real life. And, you know, if you're at the bottom of social hierarchies, then these things are not going to matter to you. But then, you know, maybe that's the point of the laws. Like, if you're at the bottom of the social hierarchy, you wouldn't be aware of any of these things. Maybe it's only the people that are at the top that are needing these things and doing these things. So overall, the book does give ideas of how to be more powerful, but what I would suggest is that you take them all with caution, because in the end, most of these suggestions are just going to sever your connections with others. And really, in this world and how our culture and life is currently, I think what's essential and important is our connections with others, and this book's not really going to help you with that. So 2 stars from me. Not recommended.